I'd spent the last 3 hours in the cold, poorly lit hallway, all because my sister thought it would be cute to put me out of sight at her wedding. As I stood there fuming, I heard them laughing, my family, the people who should have had my back, all talking about how I'd ruined things in the past. Well, if they didn't want me there, I wasn't about to beg. I walked out. And what happened next? You wouldn't believe it, but trust me, everyone was shocked. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I honestly love reading each one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, enjoy the story. My name's Rachel, I'm 51 years old, and I live in a small town on the outskirts of Albuquerque. Life's been steady, nothing too wild. I've worked at a local bookstore for years, and I've got a handful of close friends who know all my quirks and love me anyway. But family? Well, family's always a bit of a circus. Take my sister, for example, Brianna. She's always been the golden child. The one everyone called the perfect one while I was left behind, the mess, the rebel. She's 2 years younger than me, but you'd think she was 5 years older by the way she carries herself. All pristine and polished, with a smile that could light up a room. I used to admire it. Then I realized something. Her perfection always seemed to come at my expense. Her wedding had been the buzz for months, a huge deal with flowers, fancy dresses, the whole shebang. Of course, when the invite came in, I almost laughed. Brianna and I hadn't had a decent conversation in years, and I'm not sure what she expected me to do at a wedding full of people I barely knew. But I went. I thought maybe this was my shot. Maybe things could be different. Maybe, just maybe, I could sit in the front row, in my own little moment of glory. When I walked into that venue, I was ready. Sure, I wasn't in the best shape. I hadn't seen a gym in ages, but I'd put on my best dress, my hair freshly curled, and my makeup on point. Nothing too fancy, just enough to make me feel like I belonged. But the moment I stepped through the door, I saw it. "You're here, Rachel," Brianna said, but her voice was cold. I couldn't help but notice the way her eyes flickered over me just a bit too fast. She pulled me aside, away from the main party. "Look, I know you're not in the best spot with the family, but can you just stay out of the way? You know, just for today. It'll be easier for everyone." I blinked, trying to grasp what she meant. "What?" Nothing personal. It's just, you're better in the background. You don't want to ruin things." She said it like it was a favor, like it was some grand gesture. But to me, it felt like being shoved into a corner. The wedding was in full swing by now, and as everyone gathered around the lavishly decorated hall, I was escorted into a hallway just off to the side. Not even a chair in sight, just me and a wall. I tried to sit on the floor, but it wasn't the same. It felt wrong, being banished like that. My heart burned. I knew, without a doubt, that I had been humiliated. That's when it happened. I overheard them. Can you believe she showed up? My cousin Lucy's voice rang out just down the hallway. Another voice I didn't recognize responded, "Yeah." I guess Brianna felt bad, but honestly, it's hard to believe she's even invited. I heard the stuff Rachel pulled before. She's lucky Brianna's even tolerating her. I sat frozen listening, my heart sank. I heard Lucy again. What did she expect? Being included after all the mess she made? I'm surprised she even knows how to behave at a wedding. The anger inside me bubbled. It felt like everyone was against me, like I was the problem, the black sheep. How could Brianna not see what she was doing? And how could they all talk about me like that when I was just trying to be there? Without thinking, I stood up, my fists clenched at my sides. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay there, not like this. Not with them whispering behind my back. I walked out. I didn't care where my feet took me. I just needed to be away from that hallway, from their whispers, from Brianna's icy disregard. The door swung open, and I stepped into the cool evening air, the soft hum of the music from inside growing faint as I put distance between myself and everything that had hurt me. It wasn't a grand exit. It wasn't a dramatic movie moment. It was just me walking out, because for once I didn't need their approval. But as soon as I hit the parking lot, reality smacked me in the face. I stood there, taking in the vastness of the empty space, feeling the weight of every decision that had brought me here. I could have called a cab, or I could have driven myself back home, but I wasn't ready for that, not yet. I needed to process, to feel my anger without anyone trying to fix it. I needed to sit with the hurt that had been building for years and just let it breathe for a while. I leaned against my car, crossing my arms tightly, my breath coming in short, quick bursts as the adrenaline slowly faded. Then, in that quiet space, a thought cut through the noise like a sharp blade. Maybe I had walked out, but that didn't mean I had to let it end like this. Maybe I could do something no one expected, something that would make everyone understand what they'd just lost. But what? I was 51 years old. I wasn't some 20-year-old with nothing to lose. I had a job, a home, a quiet life. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. I just wanted to show them I wasn't weak, that I wasn't the family failure they all thought I was. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, and it was Brianna's name flashing across the screen. I hesitated for just a second, then answered. "Rachel, where are you?" Her voice was shaky, her usual calmness slipping. "You just left. I don't understand. Why'd you leave like that?" I could feel the strain in her voice, like she was trying to hold it all together, but the frustration I'd heard earlier was still there, just beneath the surface. I could almost hear her grip tightening on whatever she thought she was controlling. "I'm outside," I said, my voice quiet but steady, "and I'm not coming back in." "But you have to come back. This is my wedding, and you're—" "Exactly," I interrupted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "It's your wedding, not mine. I get that. But you need to understand something, Brianna. I've spent my whole life putting myself last, trying to fit into your perfect little box. I've bent myself in every direction to make everyone else happy, and where did that get me? Stuck in a hallway." Her silence stretched out on the other end of the line, and I could hear her shallow breath. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever gotten from her. "You can't just walk out," she said, her voice quieter now. "I didn't mean for you to feel—" "You don't mean to do a lot of things, Brianna," I said, my words cutting through the conversation like a knife. "But it doesn't matter, does it? You get to have your perfect wedding, your perfect life, while I get shoved aside like some inconvenient truth no one wants to deal with." "I didn't mean it that way," she whispered. But it was too late. I had already made up my mind. "I know you didn't," I said, my voice softening just a little. "But it's too late for apologies. For me, anyway. I'm not playing that role anymore." I hung up before she could say anything else. The walk back to my car was slow. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. My heart had finally caught up with me, and it was telling me something I'd known for a long time. I was done being the background character in everyone else's story. I wasn't going to just roll over and let them treat me like this anymore. As I reached for the door handle, another thought crossed my mind, one that filled me with a surprising sense of calm. Maybe it wasn't about revenge. Maybe it was about respect. Maybe, after all these years, I could finally command it, but not in the way they expected. I drove aimlessly for a while, the rhythmic hum of my car's engine keeping me company as I let my mind wander. The sting of the wedding, the laughter, the whispers, all replaying in my head. I was still angry, still hurt, but there was something else now too. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Empowerment. For years, I had allowed Brianna and the rest of the family to define me. I was the screw-up, the one who never quite made the grade. I let their judgment shape the way I saw myself. But tonight, I wasn't that person. Tonight, I was someone who had had enough. But what was I supposed to do with this feeling? Was it just a temporary thing, or was it something deeper? I thought about all the ways I'd been hurt in the past, the birthdays I wasn't invited to, the family dinners where I was excluded, the way Brianna would always make those jokes about how my life was such a mess. But as I turned a corner, something caught my eye, a small neon-lit diner on the side of the road. The sign flickered in the darkness, and I found myself pulling into the parking lot without even thinking. Maybe I needed a cup of coffee, maybe I needed to talk it out with myself, but either way, I needed something to keep the thoughts from spiraling. I parked, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. The bell above the door jingled as I walked inside, the warmth of the diner a sharp contrast to the cold outside. It was the kind of place that felt stuck in time, with old-school booths and a jukebox in the corner. I slid into a seat by the window, my mind still racing, but the act of sitting down slowed me. The waitress, a woman in her late 20s with a friendly smile, walked over and handed me a menu. "What can I get for you?" I didn't need the menu. "Coffee? Black?" I said, my voice rough from all the emotions swirling inside me. She nodded and left me alone with my thoughts. It was the perfect moment to think, to plan. I didn't want to let Brianna off the hook. I didn't want to walk back into her life like nothing had happened. I was done being the afterthought, the forgotten one. I pulled my phone from my purse, staring at the screen as I typed out a text to a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Darla. She used to be one of my closest friends, but we drifted apart after I got stuck in the trap of family obligations and trying to please everyone. "Hey, Darla, I need some advice. Brianna's wedding. Things went sideways. I walked out, and I'm feeling like I need to make a statement. Can you help me think of something that'll show them I'm done being invisible?" I didn't expect an instant reply. But a few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a reply. "I've been waiting for you to ask this. First of all, Rachel, you are so overdue for this. But here's my idea. Something public, something bold. Not about revenge, but about making them realize you're not a side character in their story. You're the lead in your own. You can't let them forget that." I smiled for the first time since I walked out of the wedding. I felt the spark of something new, something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't about hurting them. It wasn't about getting even. It was about respect. And Darla had just given me the map. The waitress came back with my coffee, setting it down in front of me with a polite smile. I took a long sip, letting the warmth settle in my chest, and for a moment I felt grounded, like I was no longer lost in a sea of family expectations and hurt. I texted Darla back, "Okay, let's do it, but we're doing it my way." As I looked out the window, I felt it, a sense of clarity that hadn't been there before. I wasn't going to sit in a hallway anymore. I wasn't going to let them keep me in the dark corners of their perfect world. This was my moment, and I was going to make sure they remembered me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. The next few days passed in a blur. I had gone home, spent hours thinking and planning, and made a few calls to Darla. She and I had started sketching out a plan, though the details were still fuzzy. One thing was for sure, I wasn't going back to that wedding to be the problem. I wasn't going to let Brianna and my family paint me as the villain in their picture-perfect world. No, I was going to take control of the narrative. The idea was simple. Make a statement. But how? Darla suggested we do something that could shift the entire focus of the wedding. It couldn't be a small gesture, something that would just slide by unnoticed. No, it had to be bold, something that would make everyone at the wedding realize I wasn't the person they thought I was. My thoughts drifted back to Brianna, how she always played the role of the perfect sister, the good one. Everyone loved her, everyone respected her, but when it came to me, I was always the afterthought, the mistake, the one who didn't quite fit in. But things were different now. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was one person I knew who could help me bring this all together, Carly. Carly was a wedding planner I had met a few years back. We'd worked together on a few community events, and I'd always admired how she made things happen effortlessly. She was sharp, smart, and had connections in all the right places. I dialed her number and waited, tapping my fingers nervously against the coffee table. After a few rings, she picked up. "Rachel, hey, how've you been?" "I'm good, Carly. I need a favor," I said, my voice firm but calm. "Anything, what's up?" "I need something big, and I need it to be, well, noticeable." "Okay, this sounds interesting. What do you need?" "I want to make a statement at my sister's wedding. I need something that will get everyone's attention, but in a way they won't forget." She paused for a beat. "You're talking about making an entrance?" "No," I replied, leaning forward, my voice low. "I'm talking about making an exit, but not just any exit, a grand one." Carly laughed softly. "I like where this is going." "Okay, let me think. But this has to be done right. It can't be messy. It needs to be something that shakes things up, but also leaves a mark." I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath. Carly got it. I knew she would. We talked for another hour, hashing out the details of how I could make this exit something memorable. Carly had contacts who could help with everything from creating a dramatic yet tasteful backdrop to arranging the perfect timing for my exit. "I've got it," she said, her voice suddenly enthusiastic. "I'll get in touch with the photographer and the videographer. When you make your exit, we'll make sure every camera's on you. People will be talking about it for weeks." I smiled, the thrill of the plan settling into my bones. Perfect. The day of the wedding came faster than I expected, but I was ready. I didn't care about the dress code or whether my outfit matched the bridal party's theme. I knew my role wasn't to fit in with them anymore. It was to stand out. I arrived at the venue early, as planned, and slipped into the back entrance. The place was buzzing with activity. I was dressed in simple black, the contrast to the white and gold of the wedding's color scheme almost purposeful. I wasn't going to be a part of the celebration, I was going to be the unexpected twist. The ceremony was about to begin, and I found a quiet spot to wait for my moment. I could feel the tension building, like electricity in the air. My stomach was a little tight with nerves, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. I was about to do something that would change everything. My phone buzzed with a message from Carly. "Ready?" I typed back, "Let's do this." The sound of soft music filled the room as the guests took their seats. Brianna was up front, the picture of elegance, her white dress glimmering in the soft light. I watched her from a distance, taking in the perfect picture she had painted for herself and everyone else. I wasn't jealous, not exactly, but it was hard not to see how everyone had fallen into the trap of seeing her as flawless. And me? Well, I had been the one who'd been tossed aside. The ceremony began, and I felt the moment was drawing closer. The guests were focused on the bride and the groom, their eyes filled with that kind of awe you only get at a wedding. But I wasn't there to steal the spotlight from them. I was there to make sure they remembered something about me. The time came. I slipped through the back door and out into the hallway, just like before. But this time, I wasn't just walking away. No, I was going to take control. With my heart pounding in my chest, I approached the door leading to the main hall where the ceremony was happening. I looked at the timing on my watch, just enough time to make a grand exit. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and stepped out. The moment I stepped into the grand hall, everything seemed to freeze for a second. The soft murmur of guests, the faint rustling of dresses, the clinking of glasses, all of it paused. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Brianna was standing there, radiant as ever, in front of the altar, her eyes locked on the man she was about to marry. It was a picture-perfect moment, until I entered. The soft melody from the orchestra was still playing, but the atmosphere shifted, heads turned, whispers followed me like a shadow. I could feel their eyes on me, could practically hear the collective gasp of surprise. Everyone who had assumed I was just an outsider, the one who didn't quite belong, was now watching me. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to steal any part of this perfect day, but I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I walked down the aisle, slow and deliberate. Every step was calculated. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't angry either, not anymore. I was calm, collected, and carrying something with me, something I was about to drop right in the middle of their perfect world. The crowd parted before me, their eyes following my every move. I could hear Brianna's voice still echoing in my head from our phone conversation, her confusion, her frustration. But now, there was no escaping this moment. I walked up to the front, just beside Brianna and her new husband. All eyes were on me now, including hers. She looked confused, and I could see the edge of panic starting to show on her face. I wasn't angry, but the sharpness of the moment made her feel it. "Rachel," she began, her voice catching, but I cut her off before she could say anything more. "I'm not here to ruin your wedding, Brianna," I said, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. My voice was steady, but the weight of my words cut through the silence. "I'm here to remind you of something." Brianna's gaze flickered to the crowd, her cheeks flushing a little. The guests around us shifted, murmurs passing between them. I didn't care. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to make a point. I've spent my whole life trying to fit into your world, your vision, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I've been quiet, invisible, and I let you call the shots because I thought that's what family does. But you know what? I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not the afterthought, not the joke, not the one who gets shoved into the hallway while everyone else gets the spotlight. There was a pause as my words sank in. Brianna looked like she was about to say something, but I held up a hand, stopping her. This wasn't about defending myself, it was about reclaiming my voice. I'm done being the person no one notices, done being the one who's always overlooked. So, no, I'm not here to make your wedding about me. I took a deep breath. I'm just here to remind you that I deserve to be seen, that I matter, and that I will not be silenced anymore. I turned then, facing the crowd completely. Everyone was staring, some of them shocked, others uncomfortable. A few people even looked like they were about to say something, but they didn't. Not yet. I could feel the tension building, the weight of the moment settling around us like a thick fog. And then I did it. I walked out again, not in anger, not in haste, but in purpose. I took slow, deliberate steps toward the door, my heart beating strong with every step. I wasn't afraid anymore. This wasn't a defeat. It was a declaration. The silence was deafening behind me. I heard a few whispers. I heard footsteps following me. But I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I got to my car, the night air still cool against my skin, and stood there for a moment. The world had shifted, and I had made sure of it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Brianna. I let it ring twice before picking it up. "Rachel, what the hell was that?" she asked, her voice tight with disbelief. "I told you I wasn't going to sit in the hallway anymore, Brianna," I said, my words cool but firm. "You can't just pretend I don't matter." "Why didn't you just talk to me?" she demanded. "Why did you have to do this now at my wedding?" I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying my breath. "Because it's the only way you'll listen. You think I'm a side character in your life, but I'm not. I'm your sister, and I'm done being ignored." There was a long silence on the other end. She was processing, trying to find words, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had been heard. "I'm not going to apologize for this," I added, my voice firm now. "I did what I had to do. You'll get over it. And maybe, just maybe, this will be the start of you realizing I deserve a place at your table." The truth was, I didn't expect her to understand right away. I didn't expect her to suddenly change overnight. But I had planted the seed, and that was enough for now. The next few days were a whirlwind of messages, calls, and, of course, the fallout. Brianna didn't let it go easily. In fact, she seemed to escalate the situation, trying to make me feel guilty about the scene I'd caused at her wedding. Her texts were filled with venom, her voice on the phone shaky with disbelief. "You've ruined everything, Rachel," she told me when she called again. "You could have just talked to me. Why did you have to make it about you? This is my day." I could hear the frustration, the hurt in her voice, but underneath it all was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Was it guilt, regret, or was it just the realization that I wasn't going to play the part she had written for me anymore? "I didn't ruin anything, Brianna," I replied calmly, though I could feel the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. "You're not the only one who's allowed to have a voice, to be seen. For once, it was my turn." There was a long pause, and for a brief moment I thought she might apologize. But then the words came, sharp and defensive. "You're selfish, Rachel. Selfish and childish. You ruined my wedding in front of everyone. What do you think they're all saying about you now?" I paused. The question hung in the air like a weight. What were they saying about me? I had no idea, but I didn't care, not anymore. What they say doesn't matter. What matters is that for once you saw me, you heard me, and maybe that's enough for now. Brianna didn't respond right away, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was speaking to her as an equal, someone who deserved respect, not just as a sister, but as a person with my own voice, my own needs. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about winning. It was about equality. I ended the call, knowing she wouldn't change her mind anytime soon, but also knowing something important had shifted. I had set a boundary, one that was firm and clear. I wasn't going to be a silent bystander in her life or anyone else's. That was the first step in the process of reclaiming my identity. The days that followed were filled with a strange mix of peace and tension. I found myself going about my life, work, errands, quiet evenings at home, but everything felt different. I couldn't stop replaying the wedding in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about how everyone had reacted when I walked out, the way the room had shifted, the whispers that had followed me. But more than that, I couldn't stop thinking about the aftermath. The messages and calls that came in were all variations on the same theme. My family's confusion, their hurt, their anger. There was a lot of why and not much of anything else. It wasn't just Brianna either. My mom called, sounding almost apologetic, but there was an undertone of disappointment that I could feel through the phone. "Rachel, you know how much this day meant to Brianna," she said softly. "Why did you have to make it difficult?" "I wasn't trying to make it difficult, Mom. I was just trying to be seen," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "Maybe I did it the wrong way, but I'm not sorry for standing up for myself. I'm not sorry for making my voice heard." Mom sighed, and I could hear her weighing her words carefully. "You know, sometimes family is about putting the other person's happiness first," she said. "Brianna's always been the one who needed the most attention, and maybe you've just been left out." "Maybe that's the problem," I shot back. "Maybe I've spent too much time putting everyone else first, and now I'm finally standing up for myself." There was a long silence, and for a second, I thought she might say something more, something that might make me feel like she understood, but she didn't. Instead, she just said, "I hope this doesn't tear us apart." I wanted to say something comforting, something that would make everything feel okay again. But the truth was, it didn't feel okay. Not yet, but it was a start. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. People started reaching out to me, not with anger, but with understanding. Friends from years ago, colleagues, even distant family members. They all seemed to get it, even if they didn't entirely understand the way I'd gone about it. One of those messages came from an old high school friend named Becky. We hadn't talked in years, but somehow she had heard about what happened at the wedding and reached out. "Hey, Rachel, I saw what happened at your sister's wedding. I just wanted to say, I've been where you are. My family, well, they never really saw me either. I just want you to know I think you're really brave for doing what you did. It's not easy to take a stand." I sat with that message for a while, reading it over and over. For once, I didn't feel alone in this. Becky understood what I had done and why. She saw the courage it took, even if it didn't feel like it in the moment. That message gave me a boost, a reminder that sometimes standing up for yourself isn't about being right or wrong. It's about being true to yourself. And maybe, just maybe, it was a sign that things could get better. That no matter what Brianna or anyone else thought, I didn't need to apologize for wanting to be seen. Later that week, I ran into Darla at a cafe we used to frequent. She had been one of the first people to support me in this whole mess. When I saw her sitting at the corner booth waving me over, I felt a rush of gratitude. "Hey girl," she said, handing me a coffee when I sat down. "You doing okay? I've been thinking about you." "I'm getting there," I replied. "I think I did the right thing, but it's complicated." "It always is," she said with a smile. "But you're stronger than you think, Rachel. What you did, showing up, saying your truth, it takes guts. Trust me, not many people have the courage to do that." I smiled, feeling the weight of everything I'd been through starting to lift. "It's been hard, but I think it was worth it." "You're gonna be okay," Darla assured me. "I can feel it." The days that followed felt like a slow burn. There was a quiet kind of power in the aftermath of that wedding. But it wasn't just the outside world that was reacting. I was still sitting with my own emotions, replaying every word, every moment, wondering if I had done the right thing. For the first time in a long time, I was asking myself questions about the kind of person I wanted to be, what kind of sister I wanted to be. It was late one evening when Brianna called again. I'd been bracing for this moment. There were a lot of things left unsaid after my abrupt exit, and it had been hanging in the air ever since. I wasn't sure what I expected from this conversation, but I wasn't about to avoid it. Not anymore. "Rachel," she started, her voice tight, almost strained. "I've been thinking about what you did. What you said. I didn't respond immediately. My heart was pounding, but I held my ground. The silence was thick, hanging between us like a storm cloud. I don't know if I can just forgive you for what you did, for how you embarrassed me in front of everyone, she continued, her words sharp. But there was a hesitation there that wasn't there before. I don't know if I'll ever get past that. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I know, Brianna, and I don't expect you to. I don't expect things to magically go back to the way they were. But I can't just keep pretending like I don't matter. I can't keep being the person who's always in the background. Not anymore. Her silence on the other end of the line made me second-guess myself for a split second. But then she spoke again, her voice lower, more uncertain. I don't know how to fix this, Rachel. I don't know how to make it right. I didn't realize how much I'd been taking you for granted. She paused, the words heavy like she was struggling to get them out. But I'm trying to understand. I want to. I really do. I don't know how. I felt something shift in my chest, a mix of relief and sadness. She was trying in her own way, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice, the rawness of her confession. This was a first, Brianna admitting she didn't have all the answers, admitting she'd messed up. For all the anger I'd carried, it felt strangely soothing to hear her say that. I'm not asking for an apology, Brianna, I said, my voice softening. I'm just asking you to see me, to hear me, to stop pretending like I'm not here. There was a long pause, and then, almost as if she was slowly accepting it, she sighed deeply. I can try, Rachel. I can try to do better. I closed my eyes, trying to savor the moment, trying to let it sink in. We weren't there yet. We weren't going to magically go back to being the sisters we were when we were kids. But this was a start, and that was all I could ask for. I'm glad to hear that, I said quietly. Maybe that's all we need right now, just a start. I'll keep trying, she whispered. And for the first time in a long while, I truly believed her. Over the next few weeks, things didn't immediately change. There were still awkward silences when we saw each other, still moments of tension where neither of us knew quite what to say. But there was something new in the air, a fragile understanding between us, one that had been long overdue. We had dinner one night, just the two of us. It was quieter than usual, but the conversation was easier. Brianna didn't bring up the wedding again. We talked about life, about work, about the small things that had once been the foundation of our relationship. For the first time in a while, it felt like we were talking as equals, not as the older sister and the younger sister, but just two people who had shared a past and were trying to navigate a complicated present. As we sat there, laughing over the simplest things, I realized something. It wasn't about the wedding. It wasn't about the way I'd been humiliated or about the revenge I thought I wanted. It was about something deeper. It was about finding my own space in the world, about standing up for myself, not for anyone else, but for me. I knew I hadn't ruined anything. If anything, I had begun to rebuild. And maybe, just maybe, Brianna and I would figure out how to rebuild our relationship too. A few days later, I received a text from Mom. It was short but thoughtful. I've been thinking about everything, Rachel, and I'm proud of you. You've always had a strength that I didn't fully see until now. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was a small acknowledgement, but it felt like a wave of relief washed over me. My mom wasn't always good with words, but she didn't need to be. That small message meant more than anything else. Maybe this whole thing had been messy, but in the end, it wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. I met Darla for coffee again a few days after that. This time, when I walked into the cafe, I felt a weight had lifted. The storm was still brewing inside me, but it wasn't as intense. The air felt a little clearer. Darla looked up as I approached, her face lighting up when she saw me. "You look like a different person," she said with a smile. "How's it going with Brianna, your mom?" I shrugged, not quite sure how to answer. "It's still complicated, but it's better, I think." Darla raised an eyebrow. "What does better look like?" "It looks like small steps," I said thoughtfully. "It's not about fixing everything overnight. It's about making room for each other, and making room for myself in the process." Darla smiled, her eyes full of understanding. I'm proud of you, Rachel. You've been through a lot, but you're handling it, and that's more than most people can say. I grinned, feeling the warmth of her words sink in. Thanks, Darla. I think I'm finally starting to understand what it means to stand up for myself, to stop waiting for someone else to give me permission to be seen. Good for you, she said, raising her cup in a silent toast. You deserve it. And as we sat there, talking about everything and nothing, I realized that it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Brianna or anyone else. It was about me. It was about me finding my voice, reclaiming my space, and realizing that I deserved to take up that space just as much as anyone else. A few weeks passed, and though things had settled between Brianna and me, there was a new kind of calm, a kind of tension that sat quietly beneath the surface, but one that was easier to handle now. We had reached an understanding, and though it wasn't perfect, it was the first real step towards something that felt like a new chapter. But the ripples of that wedding, of that moment when I had walked out, didn't stop with just my family. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of my life had been shaped by a need for approval, an unspoken expectation that I would play my part, stay in the background, and keep quiet. That moment, when I'd left the room, had been the first time I'd actively rejected that pattern. And it wasn't just Brianna who was affected. It seemed like everyone around me had been forced to reconsider their expectations, their judgments, their assumptions about who I was. It started with coworkers. I'd always been the quiet one in the office, the dependable, low-key person who kept things running smoothly without asking for attention. But one day, during a team meeting, when my supervisor, Caroline, praised everyone for their hard work, she called me out specifically. Rachel, she said with a smile, I've been meaning to say this. Your attention to detail on the last project was incredible. I think we all owe you a thank you. You're not someone who seeks the spotlight, but your contribution never goes unnoticed. I froze. Everyone in the room turned to look at me, and I felt a blush creep up my neck. It wasn't the praise. It was the sudden realization that I was being seen in a way that felt uncomfortable, but also powerful. In the past, I would have shrugged it off, minimized it, and pretended like it didn't matter, but not this time. Thank you, Caroline, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. It's nice to hear that. There was a slight pause, and then Caroline gave me a knowing look, as if she understood something more than she was letting on. It was like a small, quiet acknowledgement that I had changed somehow. Something had shifted in me. And it wasn't just visible to Brianna or my family. It was visible to the people around me, too. Later that week, I ran into Becky, the friend who had texted me after the wedding. We hadn't seen each other in years, but we'd reconnected through social media, and now we were meeting for lunch. When she saw me walk in, she waved enthusiastically, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth spread through me. She had been one of the first people to validate my feelings after the wedding, and for that, I would always be grateful. How are you? She asked, pulling out a chair for me. You look different, like in a good way, more grounded. I smiled. I guess I am, I said, settling into my seat. It's been a weird few weeks, but I'm getting there. I think I'm finally figuring out how to stand up for myself. Becky leaned forward, her expression serious. You know, Rachel, I think what you did at the wedding was huge, not just for you, but for anyone who feels like they're stuck in the background. It takes guts to walk away, to say, I'm not going to take this anymore. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. It didn't feel like guts at the time. It felt like I had nothing left to lose. But looking back, I guess it was a turning point. It's more than that, Becky said, her eyes bright. You gave everyone permission to take up space. You showed them that being quiet and letting things slide isn't the only way to exist. You made a statement without even saying a word. I laughed softly, the weight of her words sinking in. I didn't think of it like that. I just did what I had to do in the moment. But you're right. It did make a difference. That night, after dinner with Becky, I was driving home, thinking about what she had said. I was seeing things in a new light, and the more I reflected on it, the more I realized how much of my life had been spent minimizing myself, hiding my true thoughts and feelings behind a smile. I had spent so many years thinking I was just the nice one or the easygoing one, the one who didn't rock the boat. But now I felt like I was finally starting to live. I parked my car in the driveway, staring at the quiet house in front of me. I had been avoiding it for the last few weeks, too caught up in the emotional fallout of everything to really face my own space. But now I felt the pull to go inside, to reflect on the changes that had been happening inside me. I opened the door and stepped into the stillness, breathing in the familiar scent of my home. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking into someone else's life. I felt like I was stepping into mine. A few days later, I ran into my cousin, Ava, at the grocery store. Ava was a few years younger than me, and though we didn't see each other often, we always had a good time when we did. She was warm, confident, and always full of energy. And for some reason, she'd always made me feel at ease. "You're looking good, Rach," Ava said when she spotted me in the produce aisle. "You've got this glow about you. What's going on?" I laughed, surprised by her observation. "I don't know, Ava. I guess I'm just finally starting to feel like myself again." "Well, whatever it is, keep doing it," she said with a grin. "It suits you. You always seemed like the quiet one, like you were in the background. But now it's like you're there." I couldn't help but smile at her words. "I think I am," I said, feeling the truth of it settle in. "I'm finally there." As I stood in the checkout line, I realized something important. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It wasn't even just about Brianna or my family. This was about me learning to be seen, learning to take up space, and realizing that I was worthy of that space. And for the first time, I wasn't just accepting it, I was embracing it. The weeks that followed seemed to have a kind of quiet momentum, like a wave slowly gathering strength before crashing into the shore. Things with Brianna, though still not perfect, were progressing. There was no more pretending, no more acting like I wasn't there. My sense of self had grown in ways I hadn't expected, and it was spilling into every part of my life. Work, family, friends. I wasn't just the quiet observer anymore. I was present. And it felt like I was finally coming into my own skin, finding the rhythm I'd been missing for so long. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. The house was quiet, the only sound the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. The stillness felt comfortable, but I knew something was missing. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the silence. It was a text from Brianna. "I've been thinking a lot about you," the message began. "And I want to meet up. Can we talk?" I stared at the words for a moment, unsure of what to make of them. The last time we'd had a conversation like this, it hadn't ended well. My gut instinct was to hesitate, to wonder if it was another one of those moments where she was going to apologize, and I was going to have to figure out how to accept it. But then I thought about how far we'd come, how much we had both learned, even if we hadn't said it aloud. I typed back a simple reply. "Sure, when?" "Tomorrow. I'll come to your place," she responded quickly. I set my phone down, the feeling of uncertainty creeping back in. I wasn't sure what to expect, but something told me that this conversation would be different. It had to be. The next afternoon, Brianna knocked on my door. She was standing there with her arms crossed, looking a little nervous, her usual confidence tempered by something softer in her eyes. "Hey," I greeted her, stepping aside to let her in. "Come on in." She nodded and stepped inside, but there was a noticeable distance between us. Neither of us knew quite how to break the silence that had been hanging over our relationship for so long. She looked around my living room, her eyes landing on the small details, things I had picked up over the years that reflected my personality, my quiet little world. "I should have told you this a long time ago," Brianna said after a long pause, her voice low. "I'm sorry for how I treated you, for not seeing you, for not understanding you." I felt a pang in my chest, a mix of relief and sadness. It wasn't the apology I'd been expecting. It was real, raw, and without any expectation of forgiveness. And for some reason, That made it feel more genuine. "I know you were caught up in your own stuff, Brianna," I said quietly. "I get it now. I didn't see it at the time, but I get it." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. "I thought I was helping you by always doing things my way. I thought I knew what was best, but I didn't. And I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't matter." There it was, the words that had been missing for so long. "You didn't make me feel like I didn't matter," I said, surprising myself with the gentleness in my tone. "I let myself believe that. I let myself think I had to be invisible to keep the peace, but I don't want that anymore." She nodded slowly, as if taking it all in. "I guess I never really understood that about you. I always thought you were okay, that you didn't need anyone to fight for you. But you do. And I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that." I was quiet for a moment, thinking about everything we'd been through, everything I had learned about myself. "I guess we both had a lot to learn, but I'm glad we're here, even if it's messy." "Me too," Brianna said softly, a small, tentative smile tugging at her lips. "Me too." It was strange how quickly the conversation shifted. Brianna stayed for hours, and we ended up talking about everything: our childhood, our differences, our shared memories. We didn't come to any grand conclusions, but something had shifted. There was an understanding between us now, a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. We weren't done with our relationship, but we were willing to start over. That was more than I could have hoped for. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. I was alone in my bed, and yet, for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. There was no tension, no need to hide. I had started to make sense of everything, the way my family had treated me, the way I had treated myself. It was like stepping out of a fog, seeing everything clearly for the first time. And in that clarity, I understood one thing. I had to keep moving forward. I spent the next few days reflecting, not just on Brianna, but on everything: my career, my relationships, my choices. I realized that I had been putting my life on hold for everyone else, waiting for the approval I thought I needed. But I didn't need it anymore. I had spent too long trying to fit into someone else's version of me, and I was done with that. Now I was ready to live for myself. That afternoon, I went into work with a new sense of confidence. I had a meeting with my boss, Caroline, and instead of sitting quietly as I usually did, I spoke up. I voiced my ideas, expressed my opinions, and for the first time, I didn't worry about what people would think. It was freeing. And later that evening, when I ran into Darla again, she grinned at me before I even said anything. "What's different about you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You look lighter." I smiled, a real, genuine smile. I think I'm finally letting myself be seen. The change didn't happen overnight. There were still moments of doubt, still times when I questioned my choices. But what I had learned, what I had finally understood, was that I couldn't keep hiding. I couldn't keep pretending to be someone I wasn't. And now I was determined to live as my truest self. No apologies, no compromises. In the end, I didn't just get revenge on my family or my sister. I got something far more valuable. I got back my own life, my own voice, and the ability to stand tall in the world without fear. A few months passed, and with each passing day, the confidence I had gained continued to build. My relationships with my family and friends had settled into a new normal, one that felt more authentic, more true to who I was. Brianna and I had found a rhythm, one that wasn't rooted in old expectations or misunderstandings. She was trying, I was trying, and for once that was enough. But there was still a part of me that felt like I hadn't fully resolved everything. There was still the matter of my parents, especially my mom. The years of subtly dismissed opinions, of being treated as if my feelings were secondary, still lingered in the back of my mind. I had let Brianna in. I had let my coworkers and friends see me for who I truly was. But my parents? They were a different story. It wasn't that they didn't love me, I knew they did. But they still saw me as the quiet one, the one who didn't need to be heard. And even though I'd made my peace with Brianna, There was a part of me that wanted to make sure I was truly seen by everyone, my parents included. I knew it was time to have that conversation. It was a Saturday afternoon when I finally called my mom. I had been planning it for days, trying to figure out the right words, but there was no right time, no perfect way to do it. I just had to do it. "Hey, Mom," I said when she picked up the phone. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course, honey," she replied, her voice warm but distracted. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, feeling a nervous flutter in my chest. "I've been thinking a lot lately, and I need to talk to you about something important, something that's been on my mind for a while." She paused for a moment, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "Okay, what is it?" "I've been feeling like you and Dad don't really see me, not in the way I need. Like you both still think of me as that quiet little girl who doesn't need much attention, who doesn't ask for much. And I'm not that person anymore, Mom. I'm not invisible anymore." The silence on the other end of the line felt heavy, and for a moment I wondered if I had said too much too soon. But then her voice came through, softer, more thoughtful than I had expected. "Rachel, I'm sorry," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "I didn't realize you felt that way. I always thought you were content. I never meant to make you feel overlooked or like your needs didn't matter." "I know you didn't mean it, Mom," I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "But that's how it's always been. I've always been the one who didn't cause problems, the one who kept things running smoothly. But I've realized that I'm allowed to take up space, that I'm allowed to need things too." There was a long pause on the line. I could hear her breathing, hear the weight of her thoughts. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't see you for who you were. I see you now." The sincerity in her words cut through me, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. It wasn't the apology I had been waiting for. It was more than that. It was an acknowledgement, a recognition of my worth that I had craved for so long. "I know you love me, Mom," I said softly, "but love isn't always enough. I need you to see me, to really see me for who I am now, not just who I was." "I do," she replied quietly. "I really do." After that conversation, something changed. It wasn't a magic fix. It wasn't a sudden shift in the way everything had always been. But there was a new understanding between us, a new foundation built on the truth of who I was now. Not just the quiet, passive person I had once been, but a woman who was willing to stand up for herself, to demand to be heard. And that understanding wasn't just confined to my mom. When I saw my dad the next time, it was different. He didn't need to apologize, but he did something unexpected. He listened. He didn't brush off my feelings, didn't try to fix things or minimize them. He just sat there, nodding as I spoke, acknowledging the change in me. And in that moment, I realized something that I hadn't understood before. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their validation to feel complete. I had found that within myself. But the fact that they were finally seeing me for who I truly was, that was enough. The real turning point came a few months after that conversation. My parents invited me over for dinner one evening, and as I walked through the door, I was hit with a sudden sense of peace. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't all smooth sailing, but it felt real. My mom had changed the way she spoke to me, the way she engaged with me. It wasn't patronizing or dismissive anymore. My dad had begun asking questions, wanting to know more about my life, my thoughts, my dreams. We ate dinner together, and it wasn't like before. No awkward silences, no feigned interest. We talked, laughed, and shared stories in a way that felt natural, unforced. And for the first time, I realized how far I had come. I had walked out of that wedding, walked out of a lifetime of being overlooked, and had started a journey that wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself, reclaiming my voice. In the months that followed, I found myself becoming more involved with my community, volunteering for causes I cared about, speaking out about things that mattered to me. I began to explore parts of myself that I had long buried, passions I had ignored, dreams I had abandoned. I was no longer the quiet one in the background. I was the one leading the charge, offering my ideas, standing up for what I believed in, and the world around me, once indifferent, began to take notice. I had gotten my revenge, not by tearing others down, but by building myself up. The moment I had walked out of that wedding wasn't just a symbolic act of defiance. It had been the first step in taking control of my life, of saying no more to the patterns that had defined me for so long. I wasn't invisible anymore, and neither was my voice. The wedding had been a catalyst for change, but the real journey was just beginning. And as I moved forward, I knew this was only the beginning of the life I was meant to live. No apologies, no more hiding, just me, standing tall, unapologetically, as I was always meant to be. Before I go, I want to hear from you. What's been the biggest turning point in your life? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Thank you for sharing this journey with me.